Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Ever since I was a child, my love for Cadillacs burned deep within me. It became a lifelong dream to own one, a dream that persisted even after my first car met its untimely demise. My father, ever the skeptic, insisted that my initial car should be a dilapidated wreck, preparing me for the inevitable mishap. Although I was disappointed, I humbled myself and accepted his wisdom. My father had given me an ultimatum. If I desired a decent car, especially a coveted Cadillac, I had to earn the money myself. He believed that by working hard for it, I would appreciate and care for it more. So, throughout the years, I owned a series of Cadillacs, but the one that truly captured my heart was the 1953 Cadillac Eldorado Special Sport Convertible Coupe. However, finding one in good condition proved to be a challenge, as they were rare and prohibitively expensive. Fast forward 35 years, with retirement looming and substantial savings, my dream finally materialized in the form of a stunning sports convertible. It may not have been the exact model I longed for, but its powerful V8 engine and mesmerizing rumbles stole my heart. I cherished the moment spent listening to its intoxicating growl, feeling as if I were sitting next to Sam Elliott immersed in his deep and rugged voice. Unexpectedly, my reclusive neighbor Karen took notice of my newfound pride and joy. Although I had never interacted with her much in the past, she displayed an unusual interest in my car. Intrigued, I gave her a detailed tour, sharing my passion. Little did I know that this encounter would set in motion a series of events that would forever change my perspective on human nature. Days turned into weeks, and Karen's infatuation with my Cadillac grew increasingly apparent. She would stand on her porch, fixated on my driveway activities, or invent excuses to venture into her garden, her eyes filled with jealousy and resentment. Initially, I brushed off her behavior, determined not to let her disrupt my tranquility. However, tensions escalated to the point where my wife contemplated confronting Karen, intending to defend our right to enjoy our property in peace. I advised against it, preferring to avoid further conflict. As Thanksgiving approached, the situation took an alarming turn. Both our families gathered to celebrate, and my beloved Cadillac stood proudly on the driveway, captivating the attention of Karen's relatives. Hours later, during the post-feast drowsiness, an unexpected knock interrupted our lethargy. I opened the door to find Karen standing there, accompanied by a group of children, her eyes filled with puppy-like anticipation. It appeared she sought to emotionally manipulate me, using the innocent faces before her as leverage. With a disarming smile, she asked if she could borrow my Cadillac to take the kids for a drive. Taken aback, I reiterated my stance. Lending my cherished car to a stranger, even for a short ride, was out of the question. However, I extended an alternative offer, willing to take the children for a spin around the block. Karen's reaction was explosive. She berated me, her face turning crimson with anger. It was clear she had lost touch with reality, unable to comprehend the impact her actions had on everyone involved. Storming off with the children, she vowed to make me pay for ruining their day, oblivious to the fact that she was the source of the disturbance. Weeks passed, and Karen's threat seemed to dissipate until that fateful day when fate played its sinister hand. I returned home from a landscaping job to fetch a few bags of topsoil, necessitating me to temporarily move my Cadillac onto the unkempt front lawn. Mindful of the neglect my own garden had suffered, I treaded carefully, the engine's powerful roar filling the air. As I maneuvered the car onto the lawn, an eerie sound of nails scraping against a chalkboard assaulted my ears. Alarmed, I halted and stepped out, only to discover a nailboard had shredded the car's underbelly, puncturing the front tires. The hissing sound of escaping air confirmed the extent of the damage. Anguish coursed through me as I realized what had transpired. I was certain Karen was behind this act of malice. Fueled by rage, I grabbed the nailboard and stormed toward Karen's house, confronting her with undeniable proof of her vendetta. She stood there wearing a sinister smile, pretending innocence. The realization of her calculated plan only further fueled my fury. Determined to seek justice, I declared my intention to involve the police, and I stormed back to my house to make the call. Unbeknownst to Karen, I didn't possess a video doorbell, but the mere mention of it wiped the smug expression off her face. True panic washed over her as the thought of her misdeeds being recorded sank in. The following day, police officers arrived, and Karen eagerly engaged in conversation with them before I had the chance. My heart raced as I stood on the porch, fear gnawing at me, worrying that somehow I would be unjustly implicated. An agonizing half-hour dragged by until the officers emerged from Karen's house, with her in handcuffs. She was unceremoniously placed in the back of the police car, her reign of terror finally reaching its end. As rumors circulated and news reports unfolded, it became clear that the police had uncovered a cannabis farm in Karen's basement. Shock reverberated through the neighborhood, and I couldn't help but feel an ironic connection to my disgraced neighbor. Both of us harbored green thumbs, although our paths diverged into vastly different realms of horticulture. In the aftermath, the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, freed from Karen's toxic presence. The incident brought the community closer together as we realized the importance of vigilance and supporting one another. As for my cherished Cadillac, it underwent extensive repairs, rising from the ashes of Karen's destructive act. The next one is a pro-revenge story. A little over a year ago, I moved to a smallish town. I found a decent duplex on the outskirts with plenty of room for just myself. When I spoke to the landlord, or landlady, I guessed, she had implied that she'd had quite a few other people look at the place, but that those weren't the sort of people she wanted moving in. It was heavily implied, though never explicitly stated, that she wouldn't allow minorities to move into her duplexes. I really didn't care, as it was none of my business, and as long as I could get the place, I was happy. So I moved in a week later, and at first all was well. I worked Tuesday through Saturday, 5 every week, though I frequently got off later than 5. My job consisted of driving a company truck and going to customers' houses to fix their issues. I sometimes dealt with as many as 10 different people a day. At the end of the day, the only thing I usually wanted to do was go home and veg out in front of my computer. The last thing I wanted was to interact with other people or have to deal with a bunch of noise. Unfortunately, my neighbor was running her own daycare next door, watching as many as 10 or 12 kids in her little 1,000 square foot unit. She would allow these kids to run wild. My typical Monday, which was one of my weekend days, would consist of waking up at about 7 a.m. to the sounds of kids banging on walls and jumping on furniture, and hearing my neighbor scream at the tops of her lungs. This would go on all day until about 7 p.m., with no respite. Now, I knew when I moved in that she ran her own small daycare, but I didn't think it would be a problem. After all, I used to watch kids as well, only I was good at it, and I made sure the kids I watched were well behaved. Naturally, I assumed that someone running their own daycare would have the skill to control the kids. Not so. After a few weeks of this, I ended up losing my patience. I knocked on my neighbor's door and engaged her in small talk. I didn't want to immediately tell her to shut the duck up, so I just made it seem like a friendly chat. During the small talk, I realized that this woman was nuts. This was the first time we'd ever talked, and within just a few minutes she was telling me that she had an STD. I quickly forgot her name, but I always referred to her by the nickname I gave her, Crotchrot. Well, after a few minutes of conversation with Crotchrot, I decided to broach the subject of excessive noise. I started out by asking her if I was noisy and assured her that if I ever became noisy, she could ask, and I would quiet down. She assured me that she never heard a peep from me. She then asked me if she was noisy, to which I replied that there was an awful lot of noise during the day while she was watching kids. Now, I'm still trying to keep things civil and friendly, but things start going off the rails. She apologizes and tells me that running a daycare is a noisy business. She explains that this is her only source of income and she has no choice in the matter. I ask her if she's able to keep the kids from banging on the walls at the very least, to which she replies that she's one person with 10 kids, and she can't be everywhere at once. At this point, I realize that being Mr. Nice Guy isn't working. This woman is just going to keep making excuses and avoiding the issue, rather than actually trying to do something about it. I suggest that she either hire some help or take some lessons to learn how to better deal with young children. She suggests I move somewhere else and calls me stupid for moving in when I knew the next door unit was a daycare. Well, at this point I'm just pissed. This woman does a terrible job of running a daycare and handling children, and she has the nerve to call me stupid? I decide to go to war. Before going back into my own unit, I make one more statement. Do you have a license to run a daycare? It turns out that Crotchrot is good friends with the landlady, and at the beginning of the next month, when the landlady comes to collect rent, she serves me an eviction notice, giving me 30 days to leave. Her explanation is that I'm causing tensions among the other tenants and being a troublemaker. Keep in mind, the only other tenant I've spoken to has been crotch rot. Well, neither of these women knows who they're ducking with. I'm the last person to just roll over and take it in the ass, especially when I feel that something unjust has been done. I do my research and learn about my state's child care laws. I discover that there is a limit to how many children an unlicensed facility can care for, which is also based on the number of caregivers. I also learn that there are certain requirements, such as state workers inspecting the facilities and conducting background checks on the caregivers. All of that licensing information is public domain, so I do a search and sure enough, my neighbor is unlicensed and illegally watching children. After that, I do some research on housing equality laws in my state. Turns out it's illegal for anyone, even a private owner, to discriminate against potential tenants based on race, sex, religion, etc. First things first, I call up the Department of Child Protective Services and report my neighbor. I explain that she's unlicensed, that she's clearly unable to handle the children she's watching, and that I frequently hear banging and yelling coming from her unit, which has me concerned for the safety and well-being of the children. A bit of an exaggeration there, but I figured I should spice it up a bit. To my surprise, it only takes about an hour before 2 CPS agents and a couple of police officers pull up in front of the duplex. They force Crotchrot to call each of the parents to come pick up their children, then explain to the parents that if something were to happen to their children, they could be held liable for leaving their children with someone who isn't equipped to handle them. Crotchrot ends up getting slapped with a hefty fine and an order to appear in court. For the first time since I moved into that duplex, I was happy for the thin walls. I just sat there drinking a few beers and listening to all the chaos. It went on for hours. I slept like a baby that night. So Phase 1 of Operation Duplex Destruction was complete. Crotchrot was ruined. I had destroyed her only source of income permanently, caused her financial distress in the form of a fine, and got her in trouble with the law. It was time to proceed to Phase 2. By now, most of my stuff was packed, and I had found a new place to live a few miles down the street. A couple of weeks after moving to my new place, I invited a few of my coworkers over to have a few beers, though I had ulterior motives. It just so happened that I invited 2 black coworkers and 1 white coworker. After we had a couple of beers, I explained the real reason I wanted to get together. I had been working on a plan to get back at the racist landlady, and I was ready to put the plan into action. Fortunately, being such a likable guy and on great terms with all my coworkers, they were more than happy to go along. I went ahead and had one of my black coworkers call up the landlady and inquire about her for rent listing and set up a time to meet her and check the place out. I instructed my other black coworker to wait a couple of days and do the same, and I instructed my white coworker to wait until the end of the week to do the same. A week and a half came and went. During that time, all 3 of my coworkers had met with the landlady to check out the unit. She told my 2 black coworkers that she had already found another tenant and sent each of them on their way. But when my white coworker showed up later that week, she told him that she hadn't found anyone to rent yet, but that she'd had some unsavory characters show interest. Well, this was more than enough for me. I got in touch with my state's Commission on Human Relations Department. I explained that I had referred a few friends to check the place out, and the owner of the properties was blatantly refusing to rent to minorities. I also called up the NAACP and explained the situation to them. It has now been about 2 months since all of that happened. I checked back with the NAACP this morning to ask for an update on the situation. The racist landlady was slapped with a fine and is currently being sued by the NAACP for tens of thousands of dollars. Operation Duplex Destruction is a success. The next one is a petty revenge story. This is my mom's story, but she doesn't use Reddit, so I'll post it on her behalf. Some info about my mom: she's very caring and kind, but not someone you want to mess with. She can and will kick your ass, be it with words or pettiness. She's also severely disabled. Because of this, she always has a designated handicapped parking space when she lives in apartment buildings. This incident happened at her previous apartment. My mom's spot was the second one, so there were 2 other spots on either side of her. It's one she paid for monthly. The parking lot had the 4th and 5th closest spots as the guest handicapped parking. One frequent visitor of her building would constantly take my mom's paid parking spot when the guest spots were readily available. Also worth noting that they never had a disabled parking placard on display to even be allowed to park there. My mom left a polite note on their windshield the first few times it happened, but she quickly realized that it was becoming routine. It happened so often that my mom would be left without her spot for 10 hours at a time. She tried getting it towed, but the companies all insisted my mom would have to pay, and she didn't want to do that. Finally, getting fed up, she parked her car immediately behind the person who was knowingly and routinely taking her paid spot when there was one available just 2 spots over. With her balcony overlooking the parking lot, she got a book and waited. The person came out and was pissed. They tried waiting to see if my mom would come out, but she just watched from the balcony instead. They tried using an empty space beside them to get out, but that didn't work. Finally, they tried to plow through my mom's car, but with dozens of witnesses and reports about the driver illegally parking there, she was forced to pay a hefty fine and the repairs on my mom's car. She was also banned from visiting the apartment building. My mom had been planning to get a new car anyway, so the damage wasn't that big of a deal to her. Don't mess with my mom and her parking spot. The next one is an entitled people story. I've recently discovered that sitting in a chair all day, every day, can have a detrimental effect on your lower body, places like the lower core, hips, and glutes. Happily enough, my gym offers a trainer-led class that targets that area specifically. I also happen to know for a fact that the promotional material for said class exclusively features females in all the pictures. I checked the sign-ups for it, and it's listed as one I can register for. Sometimes there are specific classes for age or gender that just won't appear in my feed. Just to be double sure it would be okay for me to participate, I went to talk to the staff last Friday about it and actually ended up talking to the seemingly nice woman leading the class. Spoiler, she's a little bit of a sadist, but in a good way if you catch my drift. I mentioned my particular problems and complained a little bit about how frustrating it is trying to get stretches done based on what you see in a video. Her response was, and I quote, "Oh goody, a special project. I'll put you up front with me to make sure your form is perfect." I mentioned that the sentiment was terrifying, and she said, and this is a direct quote, "Oh, you have no idea. See you Monday." This statement was punctuated with the gleeful tiny clap some people do. Monday class time rolls around, and I show up. Turns out the class is being held in a yoga room which is heated to around 80 degrees Fahrenheit and kept fairly humid. I'm a few minutes early, and it's just the trainer and a few other girls chatting in small groups, and there's a collective glance and questioning look from everyone but the trainer, who seems downright gleeful now. She's like, "Oh, good, you're here." I talk with her about what the plan is and see exactly how inflexible I am when the EP of this story enters the room. The door swings open and 2 women enter talking to each other. One lays eyes on me and freezes. "What is he doing here?" The trainer explains my dilemma and says it's a one-time thing. I'll be in the front with the trainer, etc. The woman is not having it and keeps complaining but also enters the room, saying she's not comfortable and really thinks it's better if I leave. At this point, I'm considering drawing a hole on the floor, climbing inside of it, and then pulling the hole in after me, Looney Tunes style. The trainer and EP are going back and forth about it, and then another person enters. A startlingly pretty man wearing a purple yoga unitard enters with a big hey and immediately runs over to the different groups, giving air hugs and kisses to a fair portion of the girls present, greeting them by name, including EP. Now, when my anxiety levels spike occasionally, I'll reflexively make a joke to try and cut the tension because it's that or scream. So when the new guy elicited an actual welcome, I just blurted out, "Oh, so that's what discrimination feels like, huh?" The new guy looks at me, winks, then looks at the trainer and goes, "Oh, I like him. Isn't he a cutie?" I replied, "I think I need an adult." And everyone in the room but EP laughs. She just mutters, "Or you could just leave." After that, the trainer asked her to step out as she was becoming a disruption. "But this is supposed to be a safe space," EP declares. The new guy came to the rescue. "Honey, it's supposed to be a safe space for everyone, not just us girls. Look at him. He's a lot more scared of us than we are of him." EP looked around the room, saw she was getting no support, and huffed herself right out of the room. The class itself went on longer than it should have. It was only supposed to be an hour, and only an hour went by on the clock, but it felt more like at least 3 hours for me. My whole body was in pain. Update morning after. I knew nothing of pain while writing yesterday. Oh my god. Also, Before people call me out for this not being real discrimination or for not knowing what it's like, I realize I'm incredibly privileged to be a straight white male. I don't discriminate, and I'm well aware I have no idea how hurtful it actually is. I was not trying to make light of the concept. I just felt so uncomfortable that I blurted out the first joke that came to mind. The next one is an entitled Parent Story. We have a not-so-small vegetable garden in the backyard of my family's house. My mom and I are the gardeners, and we grow a bunch of zucchini, snap peas, herbs, broccoli, carrots, tomatoes, and even grapes, with the occasional other vegetables like radishes and bell peppers. One day, I hear something outside my window, which is right above the largest planter box in our garden. I look outside and see two kids from the neighborhood picking vegetables from the planter box. I run out and see that both of them have their arms full of zucchini, carrots, and even some tomatoes. I ask them, "What on earth are you doing?" They reply, "We live in the neighborhood." I tell them that those are our vegetables and they can't take them. They simply say, "It's our neighborhood too, we can have them if we want," and they take off before I can stop them, literally vaulting over the small fence that separates our side yard from the neighbors. Different neighbors, not the ones that were stealing. A few days later, I hear something outside my window again, and I look out to see the kid's mom loading a basket with vegetables from the planter. I rush out again and see that she and her kids are loading baskets with everything they can grab. I watch as the mom grabs a handful of the chives I'd been growing and rips them out, roots and all. My mom must have heard me running out because she comes out as well. She yells, asking them what they think they're doing, but the kids just keep picking vegetables, while the mom turns annoyed. "It's everyone's neighborhood and we need the food," she says, still picking from the garden and desecrating my prized chives. My mom tells her that if she had just asked, we would have given them some. Even if it is everyone's neighborhood, it's our garden. The mom huffs and leaves with her kids, and there isn't anything we can do. Our garden is damaged beyond repair. Our zucchini plants are torn to bits, and the peas and tomatoes are trampled and shredded. Our grape bush, which we had for years, is broken at the base where one of them stepped on it. There are no fresh vegetables that year, and my mom can't make her chocolate chip zucchini bread. A few days later, we install a lock on the backyard fence, and the neighbors come banging on our door, mad that we installed a lock, preventing them from getting into our garden. My mom just tells them to go away, and if she sees them in our garden again, she will call the cops. Thankfully, we never see them again, and our garden is happy now. We managed to bring the grapes back to life. A little while ago, we planted some blueberry bushes in our front yard. Someone keeps stealing them, and half of the blueberries are gone each season. We let the kids in the neighborhood eat them, but they only take around 8, 10 each per day on weekends or during the summer. There are 10 bushes in total, with about 100 to 150 blueberries each. I wonder who is taking 500 blueberries every year. We haven't caught them yet, but everyone knows. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.